Alright, sadly, Unrivaled fans, we have reached the end of Season 2. We got an extremely entertaining championship run from the Mist, who we might have lost in the semis if it wasn't for the heroics of Arike Agumbawale. We got an overall great season for Unrivaled exposure and players' personal brands. So let's take a look back at each team's season, highlight some players that improved, and share some thoughts on the league as a whole after completing their second season. Starting off with our champions, the Mist were at the bottom of the standings last year, with their only returning player being Brianna Stewart. She was joined by Alicia Gray, Arike Agumbawale, Veronica Burton, Lee Yaru, and Elena Smith. The Mist stayed solid throughout the season, even if quietly so, because even Brianna Stewart really only came alive towards the end. You saw her energy pick up as soon as she knew she was going to play in the Euro League for that bag. Alicia Gray was looking like she was in the MVP conversation for a few weeks there. She was the runner-up in the one-on-one competition and even won the second free throw challenge, but you did see her disappear in some moments, whether the other team was locking her down or Team Sephora just had her frustrated. But it was almost a blessing in disguise, because Arike Agumbawale would come off the bench right behind her, and as talented as she is, she still managed to raise her stock, owning that position off the bench and ending more games than she started. Arike really galvanized the team, being that X factor when they needed it most, which is kind of insane because Arike Agumbawale is not only a starter but an all-star, an MVP candidate, someone you build your team around. So the Mist really snuck that in there, especially when you consider a lot was running through Veronica Burton as well, who showed why she was the actual most improved player in the last season of the WNBA, leading Unrivaled in steals and being someone you actually had to scout for. You couldn't forget she was on the floor, especially on the offensive end, because the Mist had so much firepower on the wing and from their guards. They didn't really move through their bigs like the Phantom or the Vinyl, so you saw very little minutes from Lee Yaru while getting those pop-up minutes from Elena Smith, who specifically helped them get to the championship in that playoff game after firing off a couple of threes. So the Mist didn't come out of nowhere, but they definitely snuck in towards the end there, as Arike fell into her position, as Alicia Gray got more comfortable being that go-to guard. I still think the Phantom may have had a little more fight in them had they had Aaliyah Boston, but really the Breeze were the closest team to really figuring them out, because the Mist never really dominated like the Phantom, but they did grit out those last few wins. So congratulations again to the Unrivaled 2026 champions. Alright, then moving on to our runner-ups for the season, the Phantom had every team's number, getting that #1 seed and leading the league in point differential. Their coach was locked in, shout out to Coach Ron, and Kelsey Plum wanted to lead this team. Coming from the bottom of the standings in season 1, this team could only go up. You had returning player Natasha Cloud, joined by Tiffany Hayes, Aaliyah Boston, and Kiki Arafin. Now Satu Sabli and Dana Evans were on the team but were injured for the entire season. I think Dana Evans literally only played one game, so they were able to pull some development pool players when they needed it during certain games, but for the most part they stuck with that core. We got great seasons from Tiffany Hayes and Natasha Cloud, definition of players playing their role and bringing the energy to the team on and off the floor. The Phantom really surprised me, a completely different team from last year, but man did they click. Kiki Arafin is my jumped in stock player because she did have to come in for Boston, but she did great, going up against Brittany Griner, Brianna Stewart, and the likes of Cameron Brink, so she brought it, and she had the backing of her team, which just showed off that unrivaled camaraderie. Having Aaliyah Boston in that championship game may have changed things, but they still did what they could, especially having Isaiah James, who was balling out no matter what team she played on, as well as having the coach of the year and the defensive player of the year. So by those last few weeks, I was still hoping for a change in the Vinyl, but it really was the Phantoms to lose, and sometimes it just swings that way. So those were the last two teams standing. Let's go through the other teams, starting with the first ones out. One of the first clubs to not make the playoffs was one of the expansion teams, the Hive. This club included Sonia Citron, Monique Billings, Sanaya Rivers, Kelsey Mitchell, Ezzie McBeggar, and Natisha Heidemann, while being coached by Rena Wakama. The Hive struggled out the gate. There were high expectations for Kelsey Mitchell and looking for Rivers to have a breakout season. Their bigs actually did well. Ezzie looked good, like she could flow with Unrivaled, but we lost her to injury. Mo Billings is probably their breakout star, just getting progressively better as the season went on. No matter what they were throwing at her, she was figuring out how to put her stamp on every game she played. T had flashes throughout the season, but the Hive never really found a groove as a team, and with that, an identity throughout the players. They ended the season with a 4-10 record, honestly ending up in matchup hell in almost every game. Even if Kelsey Mitchell made it into the paint and got a kick out, the 3 game wasn't good enough. T and Sanaya ended up being more liability abilities on the floor, whether it was because of size or intentional switches. They lost a lot of games early and spent a lot of time trying to dig themselves out of a hole. So look for this team to completely retool next year. Hopefully Coach Wakama gets another shot at it, but with how different the W will look in the upcoming season, some of the Hive could end up being teammates. Then looking at the other club that didn't make it to the playoffs, the Lunar Owls, featuring Marina Mabry, Rachel Bannum, Skylar Diggins, Aaliyah Edwards, Rebecca Allen, and Timmy-Faye Benley. They did lose Nafisa Collier before the season started and were well aware she wouldn't play at all during the season. Marina Mabry and Aaliyah Edwards ended up being the only saving grace for this club because they would also lose Skylar Diggins for the first few games of the season. And even after she came back, it was harder to find a groove. It was like the team was out of place position-wise without Fee to anchor them. Marina is the player that raised her stock on the Owls. Edwards did this last year, so she's okay, but Marina was able to facilitate and still be the leading scorer, adding to her bag and sharpening her decision-making skills as a guard. My personal runner-up for most improved player because she definitely left her mark in Philadelphia. Regardless of what goes on with that team, Marina Mabry went off for 47 points in a travel game for Unrivaled. So if nothing else, she gained more fans in that one night than years in the W. Timmy-Faye Benley did pretty good for the position they put her in, and honestly, Skylar did her best coming back to the game. She had a couple of slow games, but she was back in her bag, averaging about the same points, assists, but the overall team just couldn't get there because you really weren't getting a lot from Bannum, and it was getting harder and harder to place Rebecca Allen being so heavily dependent on Aaliyah Edwards. I mean, Bannum had 5 straight games where she only had 5 points. Her season high was 12. Coming off the bench, it's really not that complainable, but she was the third option, and 3 points isn't gonna cut it. So the Owls had a lot of trouble losing starters and having a weak bench. They did technically end in a better position than the Hive, even if they had the same record. So we can at least give them that. Okay, and then looking at one of the most surprising outs in the playoffs, let's take a look at the Laces. This team featured Brittany Sykes, Naz Hillman, Jordan Canada, Jackie Young, Alyssa Thomas, and Maddie Segrist. Coached by Andrew Wade, this is one of the teams that actually used their entire roster. Having a decent squad, you saw something from everyone throughout the season. They were a steady team with a 10-4 record. The breakout star for the Laces is most definitely Brittany Sykes. If they were giving out most improved player, it would go to her without a doubt. She played with so much confidence throughout the season, doing it all on the stat sheet and on the floor. Sykes ended up being the anchor in the clutch, the defender on the other team's best ball handler, even being given the ball for game winners and keeping the team honest. She really raised her stock, most obviously with her peers. As a team, they were able to figure it out, most notably that big three, Jackie Young, Alyssa Thomas, and Brittany Sykes, keeping them at the top of the standings throughout a majority of the season. But that's also what makes Unrivaled so much fun. It really can go to either team. And the Laces ended up losing in the playoffs when the Vinyl shut down Jackie Young. She only had 5 points, allowing everyone else to quote-unquote go off. Sykes got 22 and Thomas snagged 18. Even Jordan Canada gave you 11, but that's just not enough. And going up against an activated Ryan Howard, the game crept away from them with every possession. The analysts say they found their stride too early, but that also just means they were better than everyone else out the gate, so it helped and hurt them at the same time. Still a very solid club, and in single elimination, all they could really do was leave it on the floor. No blowouts, just an L to the chin to end the season. Alright, now on to the Vinyl, featuring Ryan Howard, De'Erica Hamby, Ray Burrell, Brittany Griner, Erica Wheeler, Courtney Williams, and being coached by the legendary Teresa Weatherspoon. I picked them for both seasons now, simply because of that combination, Spoon, Howard, and Hamby, but there's obviously something wrong with my eyes for seeing more than what they're actually putting out. The team is just filled with raw talent, so it's hard to see them not be able to pull it off together. And honestly, it seems like they had the same problem as last year. Too much reliance on Howard, living or dying by the type of game she has specifically. They got a nice shakeup when Spoon started Ray Burrell, which then meant you had one of the taller and longest 3-woman lineup in the league. Now, they were kind of forced into it after the trade, but we'll get to that. This was working for the Vinyl. They were seeing a small uptick in their performance, but as soon as something was working for them, it's like they had an internal need to change it. And maybe it was just stomaching putting it in Burrell's hands instead of Ryan Howard, but it didn't make it any easier to watch. Specifically in the playoff game against the Rose, any pick and roll with Ryan Howard and De'Erica Hamby, the defenders could not decide how to defend that. If they switch, you get an easy dump in by Hamby because you had somebody tiny on her, or trying to stay connected, and Ryan Howard creates just enough space for the 3. And every time they ran it, they ended ended up with a bucket. The Vinyl kept running into this problem time and time again though. When the matchups favored BG, it was too easy for the other team to make the Vinyl change up their game plan. And I think it comes back to Spoon. She gives her players a lot of room to deviate and take charge if they need to. So it's harder to assign blame pie when it's everyone. I really want to say if they'd have just made it over that one hump, it'd have been smooth sailing, but I saw every team figure out how to break them down. But anyway, Ray Burrell was their breakout star. I mean, she's so fluid on the court, she can score from anywhere. It looks like she's been practicing with her brothers her entire life. When they put the ball in her hands, the Vinyl were the most active. Kind of like if Ryan is the second option, her team will go farther than if she's number one. I love Spoon, but maybe as an assistant coach or head of player development, not in a bad way, but she seems to put the relationship and how the player feels over the outcome of the game. And that mindset can be better utilized in a different position. Alright, and then coming to the youngins, what a season the Breeze had, featuring Paige Beckers, Dominique Malonga, Rakia Jackson, Kate Martin, and Cameron Ray, being coached by the lovely Noelle Quinn. The Breeze started off with a lot of noise, especially having Paige Beckers to highlight the team, wonderfully pairing a tenacious Noelle Quinn with this young squad, showing up stunning opponents immediately, winning 4 of their first 6 games. You could feel the connection with this group, and it showed out on the court. It was a nice combination with Paige and Dominique Malonga, giving us our first killer storyline of the season, with Dom dunking in a game against the Lunar Owls. Now, BG did dunk in season 1, but what made Dom's different was seeing it in Unrivaled instead of the W. The smaller ball probably helps, but Dom ended up dunking 3 times in Unrivaled, with the last one being the most emphatic after they ran a play setting her up to get the dunk. I love what we got to see from Dominique Malonga. Even if you watch the W regularly, as a rookie, we didn't get to see her play with this much freedom. While Paige would be my breakout star for this team, we got to see a lot from Rakia and wonderful flashes from Dom. We didn't get a lot of playing time from Kate Martin, especially down the stretch. She did have a little slip down the stairs a couple of games before the end of the season, but throughout the season, it looked like she was fighting for playing time, so I'm not sure that's really to blame. The games are so fast-paced, we will see subs, but it's also a pretty short game, 7-minute quarters and untimed fourth that could technically go pretty quickly if someone's on a heater, but the Breeze are one of the teams that relied on their starters, so you rarely saw the bench in action, if at all. They didn't have McDonald at all the entire season. You got Courtney Williams that came through towards the end after the trade, and they seemed to use Cam when they needed more defense than offense. So you saw a lot of Paige Beckers. Even if the ball wasn't in her hand, a lot was ran for her, whether it was just to get her in action, other teams activated, or everybody moving as one. With Rakia out, having personal situations pull her away from Unrivaled for a few games, it really would become a Paige and Dom season for the Breeze. I'm sure any iteration of this team will be welcomed back by the fans next year, especially with the same coach. Alright, now let's take a look at our reigning champions, the Rose, who came out super hot. Being led by Chelsea Gray, this team also featured Kalia Copper, Shakira Austin, Lexi Hull, Suggs Sutton, and Azare Stevens, keeping their same coach, Nola Henry. Out the gate, the Rose looked like they were on the road to a repeat, and honestly, Chelsea Gray picked up MVP week 1. They just looked good matchup wise. Chelsea could break down or get past her defender, who was either smaller or slower than her, opening up the bigs and wing shooters. Having Hull on the wing is money, and Stevens and or Austin in the paint isn't too shabby at all. They didn't really hit a wall until Kalia Copper came back, which is kind of bad to say, but that's really just how it happened. She was scoring, Gray was still doing her thing, but they were losing. Going from a solid top seed to making sure they would even make the playoffs, ending with a 6-8 record, and then seemingly out of nowhere, the league invokes a trade that would end with the Rose losing Stevens but receiving Angel Reese, something the fans just weren't prepared for. The Rose had new life. Reese came in like she had been playing all season, somehow still being the first to 100 rebounds in league's history without playing a majority of the season. But the Rose looked good, had high hopes to make it through the playoffs, and with Chelsea Gray leading the helm, they had a lot of people's votes. Coming down to it in the playoffs though, when everybody zooms in, the hole started to show in the Rose, and the Breeze took the Rose out pretty much by making it hard on Chelsea Gray. At the same time, playing with that run and gun attitude that basically just wore the Rose down. Kalia Copper ended up being their leading scorer with 16 points. Reese did get him 7 rebounds, but as a team, they only hit 4 threes. It was hard to watch, but Chels did try to dig them out in the third. It just wasn't enough. The Rose in their second season, in the first round of the playoffs, and just the emotion from Chelsea shows how serious they take their job and passion, and for something this new, that's what really makes Unrivaled so real. Now, after the excitement died down from Philly, we started getting rumblings of Angel Reese, which was odd at the time because she wasn't even in the country. But what kicked it off was the first in-season Unrivaled trade. Right before the start of season 1, they did have a trade, but it was more of a balancing act for the team and marketing wise to have some players on the same team coming from the W. So it's not really in the same boat here. We did go over the trade in detail in the week 5 video, but the trade itself is more concerning because it throws a wrench in how the players are affected. The teams don't have owners and there's money on the line for the winners. So as a player, I don't want to be traded to the Hive, the literal worst team in the league. I mean, had the roles won, would Azare Stevens get a cut? And even if the league was taking an exceptional player at the almost end of the season, why did the Rose just get to snatch her up? And as a fan, do you value clarity or spectacle? Because it was definitely entertaining, albeit seemingly unnecessary, having a full development pool to pull from and not use them. So I may be alone, but I'm glad none of the teams involved in the trade made it to the finals. But after the dust settles from the trade, we all get to look forward to the one-on-one tournament, and I think that's actually going to end up being the staple for Unrivaled. They may even take players that don't participate in the season in the future, but it breaks through the fog of basketball news and gives you a reason to stay locked in for your favorite player, even if their team isn't doing well in the standings. You saw it a little bit everywhere on all the platforms. Anyone basketball related had something to say about this one-on-one tournament, and we went through most of the best matchups in the week 6 video, but that last matchup between Chelsea Gray and Alicia Gray was a masterpiece. Obviously their last game, the game that decided the $200,000 winner, and it was the longest game in the entire tournament. They were absolutely exhausted, and as someone watching it, it's almost selfish to say that that's what you want to see. You want to see them leave it all out on the court because you know you're getting the best action. And outside of watching the playoffs and seeing a champion, that is definitely my highlight of the season. They'll probably say it's Philly or New York, but I love the one-on-one tournament. So congratulations to Chelsea Gray again for that win. Looking back at it, it was a fun season, so congratulations to the Mist. Brianna Stewart did win Finals MVP. Looking through the rest of the superlatives, again, Aaliyah Boston was awarded Defensive Player of the Year, along with Renika Hodges winning Coach of the Year. Unrivaled first team was Chelsea Gray, Kelsey Plum, and Paige Beckers, well deserved. Second team, all Unrivaled, you got Alicia Gray, Brittany Sykes, and Aaliyah Boston, again, very well deserved. Unrivaled is so personable. I thought the fans would get more action on the superlatives, but that extra energy probably went to getting them to New York, so it's all good. And then wrapping it all up for Unrivaled, just revisiting how much they pour into their players. Unrivaled gets a big W for leaning into helping these players become on-call analysts, sideline photographers, artists, R&B artists, fashion stylists, and Unrivaled just gives them this space to explore that while also putting them in the best space to be better at basketball. So while there are a few things we can suggest or assume Unrivaled may change in the upcoming seasons, one thing I think they'll do is keep adding to these extracurriculars. So many players were on the call, like they had a little mini class in there somewhere. Skylar Diggins is really good at it. Sabrina Ionescu seems like she has had experience in the past. And then you get to players like Alicia Gray, Mo Billings, and the Stud Buds showing off their personalities and adding to the culture on Unrivaled with each iteration, on top of nurturing their players' other interests, allowing Naz Hillman and Azare Stevens to take official photos while on the sidelines, giving Ryan Howard the space to have a mini art showing and sell some of her pieces. Jordan Canada recorded her R&B album during Unrivaled. So many of them are into fashion, with Tiffany Hayes having her own line, Dana Evans wanting to be a stylist. Unrivaled being made by the players for the players obviously puts them first, but it also made them recognize how much they need to connect with their fans, giving each club a club night, and if you were lucky enough to be there, you got up close and personal with some of your favorite players, and maybe even one of your favorite celebrities, especially in this women supporting women arena. Not only did we get celebrities in Philadelphia and New York, yeah, Usain Bolt pull up in Miami. They had Wanda Sykes, Leslie Jones, the Issa Rae, Quinta Brunson, Kyle Lowry. Hell, Kevin Durant stayed all day that last day of Unrivaled, watched all 4 games, and it really becomes more of a buy-in. It's the place to be, especially when you have someone like Bolt admitting to becoming a season ticket holder in Dallas after watching Paige play. It seems genuine, and Unrivaled is doing its job to make it somewhere they want to be and be seen, for that matter, because I know I want to be there. Hopefully they get a little bit closer to California next season. But thanks for rocking with me, especially the squad over on Blue Sky. It was definitely a fun run, and we'll do this again next time.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, players.